At Thanksgiving, my sister stood up, tapped her glass, and announced as if she were giving a speech, "Mom and Dad are signing the house over to me. Emily gets nothing." The room reacted instantly. Cheers, whistles, someone even shouted, "About time." I didn't clap. I didn't flinch. I simply smiled the way you do when a storm hits, but you already know the house isn't yours to begin with. I set down my fork. "Dad," I said quietly, "should I tell them, or will you?" His face went pale. My sister froze. And in that moment, everyone realized something was about to surface. Before I explain what happened after that silence, tell me, where are you listening from tonight? It helps knowing there are people who understand families like mine. My name is Emily Nolan, and before that Thanksgiving, you might have assumed we were close. The kind of Midwestern family you see on holiday cards, matching sweaters, smiling by the tree, acting as if no one ever raised their voice. But families like mine don't collapse loudly. They wear down quietly through small choices about who gets attention and who doesn't. For as long as I can remember, I lived in that quiet space, the one where people notice you only when they need something. Jenna, my younger sister, never experienced that. She was the favorite, bright, outgoing, full of charm, the relative everyone praised, calling her a natural, a spark. I didn't resent her for it. I just understood early on that I would have to build my own path because nothing would be handed to me the way it was to her. Growing up, I watched my parents invest in Jenna like she needed constant care. Dance classes, summer programs, private lessons. The same things I was told we couldn't afford when I asked. Later, when I moved to Chicago for work, they called it selfish, as if choosing independence meant abandoning them. Meanwhile, Jenna stayed close, visiting every weekend, fitting neatly into the role they created for her. Still, I kept coming home for holidays, mostly for my grandmother. Evelyn Nolan, sharp mind, silver hair, the only person in the family who looked at me with genuine pride. When she hugged me at the door, it didn't feel obligatory. It felt like being recognized. She'd tap my cheek, whisper, "You're stronger than they think," then return to her seat as if she hadn't just given me enough confidence to last another year. This Thanksgiving felt different even before it started. The air in the house was heavy, expectant, as though everyone but me had been told something. Mom moved around the kitchen with the tight smile she uses when hiding something. Dad avoided my eyes. Jenna kept brushing imaginary lint off her dress. And in the dining room, I noticed something else. A chair that should have been next to mine was gone. Not moved. Missing. I should have realized then. You'd think the empty chair would have been enough of a warning. But in my family, the problems are always quiet before they surface. I sat down anyway, smoothing my napkin, pretending not to notice the way conversations dipped whenever I walked into a room. Voices went flat for a moment, like someone hit mute, then picked up again with forced laughter as soon as I passed. Jenna moved around confidently, checking place settings, adjusting the centerpiece, whispering small instructions to Mom that made them both smile. Every so often, she'd give me a tight, polite smile, courteous but hollow, like I was a coworker she barely knew. It wasn't always this way. For years, we were just two sisters sharing a room, passing notes under the door, staying up when we weren't supposed to. She braided my hair, borrowed my sweaters, begged me to drive her around when I got my license. But somewhere between high school and adulthood, things shifted. She fit easily into the role my parents shaped for her, the ideal daughter, while I drifted quietly out of the frame. The house issue began 6 months earlier, long before her announcement at Thanksgiving. It was a humid Saturday in June when Mom called, asking me to come home for something important. No details, no explanation. When I arrived, they brought me to the dining table, the same table where everything would later unravel. Dad had a folder placed neatly in front of him. Mom's smile looked strained. "Sweetheart," Dad began, "we're refinancing the house. Just a quick signature. Better rates. You won't have to worry about a thing." Even then, something in me tightened. My family never asked for help unless it was more serious than they admitted. I flipped through the papers, heart steady but alert, trying to understand the numbers. Something felt wrong. Too many pages, too many blacked out sections, too many rushed explanations. "Can I take these with me?" I asked calmly. "My lawyer can review them." The silence that followed told me everything. Mom's smile wavered. Dad closed the folder too fast, like he regretted showing it to me at all. "It's just a formality," he insisted. "Why complicate things?" But I took the folder anyway. Back in Chicago, my lawyer read through the papers, her eyebrows rising with every page. She didn't hesitate. She called the next morning. "This isn't a refinance," she said. "It's a transfer of liability. If you sign, you take on their debt." Debt? I stared at the phone, stunned. She explained clearly. A second mortgage, months of missed payments, foreclosure notices, things I had never been told. And when she finished, something inside me solidified. Not anger yet, something steadier. 2 months later, Dad called again, asking for money. Not a loan, not support, money. He said it was for Mom's medical bills, but when I offered to pay the hospital directly, he broke down. The story changed. The truth came out. Late payments, deadlines, and growing pressure. And now, sitting at that Thanksgiving table watching Jenna enjoy everyone's attention, the weight of those 2 months settled heavily on me. They weren't giving her the house, they were giving her the debt. And they expected me to sit quietly beside her while it happened. By the time November arrived, the secret hung between my parents and me like an exposed wire. We didn't discuss the papers I refused to sign or the call where Dad admitted what was really happening. Our conversations shrank into weather updates and vague questions about work, as if small talk could hide the obvious. What they didn't realize was that I had done more than decline. I checked the property records myself. I knew about the second mortgage, the rising interest, and the foreclosure timeline already in motion. They were struggling and trying to pull someone else into it. For a long time, I assumed that person was meant to be me, the one with a steady job in Chicago, no kids, the one they viewed as a built-in safety net. Saying no to them felt unfamiliar and heavy with guilt. Then Jenna began posting hints online, captions about major changes, photos on the front porch with our parents, jokes about being ready to be a homeowner. Each post confirmed what I already suspected. A week before Thanksgiving, Mom called, sounding thrilled about how excited Jenna was to host more often once the house situation was finalized. She said it casually, as if the house were a simple inheritance, not a problem being handed off. That was the night I stopped hoping they would resolve anything themselves. I went to my desk, pulled out a folder, and filled it with what I had collected. Overdue statements, notices, summary pages, outlining exactly how serious the situation was. I didn't plan to embarrass anyone. I wanted to make sure no one could claim they didn't understand what they were accepting. On Thanksgiving morning, I drove back with that folder in my bag and a tight feeling in my chest. Part of me still hoped they would speak up, admit the plan had gone too far. Instead, Mom met me with a tense hug that smelled of perfume and stress. "You look beautiful," she said. "Jenna will be so happy you're here." The way she said Jenna, not we, told me everything. Inside, the dining room was fully set. Extra table leaves, polished glasses, every chair filled except mine. My grandmother noticed me from her spot and gave a small knowing nod as if she understood more than anyone else. As I sat down, my hand brushed my bag, the folder inside, quiet but undeniable. If they were turning this holiday into a presentation, I was done sitting silently in the background. When my sister stood and tapped her glass, I already knew I was about to watch a moment they'd prepared without me. Jenna stood there, confident, her hair styled neatly, the necklace our grandmother gave her catching the light, as if chosen for exactly this announcement. "Mom and Dad are signing the house over to me," she said, her voice bright across the table. "Emily gets nothing." The room reacted instantly. Clapping, cheers, a few whistles, and the kind of laughter people use when they think they're supporting something positive. Someone even patted Dad on the back. Mom dabbed her eye as though she were watching something sentimental unfold. I didn't touch my drink. I didn't even blink. I simply looked at Jenna with a steady smile, the kind that carries everything you're holding back. Then I set my fork down and asked Dad, "Should I tell them, or will you?" The shift was immediate. The room went silent, heavy enough to hear the radiator ticking. Dad's hand slipped. His fork hit the plate with a sharp sound. Jenna's expression tightened. "Tell us what?" she asked. Around us, relatives leaned closer, sensing something they weren't expecting. My grandmother let out a quiet breath, as if she had been waiting for someone to stop pretending. I reached into my bag, took out the folder, and placed it on the table. I didn't open it yet. I simply let it sit there, clear and unavoidable. Before you celebrate Jenna getting the house, I said evenly, you should probably know the condition it's in. Dad tried to recover. Emily, not here. Why not? I asked. You weren't concerned about timing when you decided to sign it over to her without explaining the debt. Heads turned. Voices stopped. Jenna stiffened, like she was holding herself still. What debt? She demanded. I opened the folder. A stack of overdue payments and notices faced up at us. I moved one page forward, the summary line bold at the top. They're behind on payments, I said, on 2 mortgages. The second one was taken out without telling anyone. Foreclosure is months away, maybe weeks. Mom raised her hand to her mouth. Dad flushed. Jenna stared, taken off guard. That's not true, she said, her voice rising. They would have told me. Did they tell you? I asked, looking directly at her, that the house carries over $100,000 in debt, and that, if you sign the papers, you're responsible for every overdue payment and penalty? Something shifted in her face, uncertainty replacing confidence. Dad tried again. You're making this sound worse than it is, Emily. We're handling it. Are you? I asked, lifting another page, because this one shows the bank doesn't agree. He leaned forward as if he could pull it from my hand in front of everyone. I pulled it back before he touched it. Stop, Mom said quietly. Please don't do this today. Why not? I asked. You chose today. Relatives began shifting in their chairs, some uncomfortable, some suddenly curious, and a few clearly irritated at being drawn into something they hadn't expected. My Aunt Diane was the first to speak. Daniel, she said sharply. Is this true? Dad didn't respond. His jaw was tight and Mom hid her face in her napkin. Jenna looked between them and me. They told us the house was mine, she said. It was never a gift, I replied quietly. It was their way out. They needed someone to take on the debt. They tried to trick me first. When I refused, they turned to you. Jenna stood frozen in her sequin dress, trembling. Her fiancé, Tyler, leaned slightly away from her, unsure how to react. Is she lying? He asked. Your parents? Mom started crying. Dad kept staring at the table. Tyler pushed his chair back and stood. You told me the house was paid off. You said we'd start fresh, he said. Jenna reached for him, but he stepped back. You expect me, he said, voice shaking with frustration, to build a future on something already sinking? Tyler, please. He shook his head. I'm not marrying into this. The room fell silent as he walked out, past the food, past my shocked parents, and out the front door. Jenna collapsed into her chair, hands shaking, mascara smudging. For a moment, she looked like the little girl who used to come to my room after nightmares. This isn't my fault, she whispered. I didn't know. I know, I said. Dad slammed his hand on the table. You ruined everything. I met his stare. No, you ruined everything the moment you tried to hand your debt to your children as if it were an inheritance. You're tearing this family apart, Mom said through tears. It was already broken, I replied. I'm just not covering it up anymore. A quiet murmur spread through the relatives. Agreement, disappointment, judgment. My grandmother stood slowly, steadying herself on the table. Her voice, thin but firm, cut through the tension. I taught you better than this, she said to my father. Your daughters are not lifeboats for you to climb into. Dad looked smaller. Mom cried harder. Jenna lifted her head, eyes empty. What do I do now? She asked. The question hit deeper than she intended. Not because I had the solution, but because she was finally asking the right person, not the parents who built her illusions. Before I could answer, someone knocked hard on the door. Everyone turned. The second knock was louder. Dad frowned as the door opened and a woman walked in wearing a plain suit, a badge on her belt, her expression calm. Mr. and Mrs. Nolan, she said, I need to speak with you about your mortgage records. The room erupted again in disbelief. Mom nearly fell over. Dad went pale. Jenna gripped the edge of the table. I stayed still, breathing evenly as the truth finally landed where it needed to. Why is she here? Dad whispered. We've received a report of possible financial misconduct. The investigator said. I have some questions. The room fell silent. No one cheered. Emily, Mom sobbed. Tell her you misunderstood, please. I didn't respond. Not yet. The truth was only beginning to surface. As the investigator stepped inside, the last threads holding my parents' story together broke. She asked clear, direct questions about payments, overdue notices, and the second mortgage. Each avoided answer made the room feel tighter. Relatives slowly pulled away as if distancing themselves from a fire. Jenna sat still, hands shaking in her lap, not angry anymore, just drained. My grandmother stood behind her, resting a steady hand on her shoulder. When the investigator left with the documents, the house fell into a heavy quiet. Mom reached toward me. Dad muttered that I had embarrassed them. Neither apology nor accusation meant anything. I picked up my coat. Jenna whispered, "Don't go, I'll still be here." "I know," I told her, "just not for their lies anymore." In the weeks that followed, everything changed. My parents had to face the reality they created, layer after layer of secrecy, excuses, and debt. The house went on the market. They moved into a small apartment across the city, quieter than they had ever been. No more big claims. No more golden child stories. Jenna started therapy. She called me often, sometimes to cry, sometimes just to sit quietly on the phone. She told me she finally understood why I stopped letting our parents speak for me. And I learned something I should have realized long ago. Telling the truth isn't betrayal. Hiding it is. Families built on denial eventually collapse. If you've ever had to stand alone at a table full of people who say they love you, tell me where you're listening from. And after hearing my story, what would you have done?